All right. Well, thank you so much, ladies. It's so wonderful to be here with you all again. For those at home, welcome, divas and dudes. My name is Raquel de Hoyos, and I am kicking us off with another 4 week series. And this time we're going to focus on mental health because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. But we'll be talking about mental health, brain health, especially, and nutrition and how that connects to our brain health. So today I wanted to kick us off with a delicious recipe and something fairly easy, which is wonderful because I don't need any cooking equipment for it. Some of this has been done in advance. And what is it I'm always telling you all? Like when you have a recipe that has a lot of parts and you're like, oh, I'm so tired. Do I have to make this? Like, how long is this going to take me? What's one quick thing you can do to just kind of help you along if you want to make a recipe? Do it in steps, exactly. So some of these steps I've done in advance and you can do the same thing at home. But for our honey corn cakes is what we're going to be making today. This is kind of a recipe. I always like to tell you the story of how I came up with this. This is actually a recipe I made many years ago when I was working for the Potato Commission in Washington State. And I had to do everything potatoes, which I loved because it was always a challenge for me. And I wanted something for summer, or that's kind of what the theme was. And I was like, boy, how am I going to put a potato in a dessert? But you all will be surprised at how delicious this is. And we're packing in a lot of great vitamins, nutrients, which we'll go over in the nutrition section when we get to that, because there are a lot of great things that we're adding in this recipe that will help with our brain health. Okay, so if you take a look at your recipe, what we have today is the potato, of course, and I would say just kind of a medium, a smallish potato. Basically, you're going to cook this potato until it's tender and then let it cool and mash it up. And so that's what I did ahead of time. I took a potato, just kind of diced it, keep the skin on because the skin is fiber, right? And we want all that good fiber in there. And then I just mashed it up. So this is what I have here. And then if you were doing this all together and, all together in all the steps, just let this cool a little bit before you add it to your wet ingredients. But we're good to go because that's already been pre-cooked. And then for our dry ingredients, we have a couple of things. We're going to start with 1.5 cups of fine cornmeal. And the brand that I used, you can use any brand, but the one that I like is this Pioneer. It's local, right? You got to celebrate local here. And so it's just this really nice fine. You could use the coarse grit if that's, if you love to make cornbread or corn muffins, that works really well, gives it extra texture and crunch. But I like this fine cornmeal, so that's what we're going to start with. And then we have 1 cup of bread flour. There's all sorts of bread flour on the market these days. And why am I using bread flour and not just regular flour? Good question, Raquel. You could use either. But I remember when I tested this recipe, what I was hoping for was to get a little more lift and more volume. However, 2 things with bread flour. So bread flour has a little more protein than regular flour, all-purpose flour, and it also has more gluten. And so that's also going to help with some of the lift and the volume in your final corn cake. And we're doing a couple of things to help with that, but the bread flour is one of those. But if you didn't want to buy bread flour, not a problem. You could do it with all-purpose flour. Okay, and then the other thing we're going to add is a little bit of sugar. So we have about 1/2 cup of just regular granulated sugar. And then some other dry ingredients. One of my favorite things is flaxseed, and that also definitely has some great health properties, which we'll get into a little bit later. This is golden flax. You could buy just the seed, and if you have like a blender that you use to grind up your spices, you could grind that up there. You could probably put it in a food processor as well. But this is just what I purchased. It's this golden flaxseed meal, so it's already pre-ground and lots of yummy stuff. I tend to keep this refrigerated just because once you grind it, it releases some of those essential oils and you don't want it to go rancid. So keep it in a cool, dry place, but I typically tend to keep mine in the fridge. And so that is 1/4 cup of our flax. And then we're going to add 1 tablespoon, 1 big whopping tablespoon of baking powder. So that's also going to help with some of our volume in these corn cakes. And then the last thing is 1 teaspoon of salt, because to balance out all of our baking ingredients here, the sweet and the salty, and to bring out some of that flavor as well, we're going to add that salt. And then If it were summer and you wanted to use fresh corn, corn on the cob, you could do that as well. I would say maybe just blanch it a little bit so it's partially cooked. And then just make sure that there's not a lot of liquid. But today I'm using frozen corn that I defrosted and just drained a little bit. So we're going to add that as well. And then the final thing we are going to add is a lemon. So this, I think, is what really makes this recipe. These smell so good, and I'm always sad that when I make stuff in the morning, I'm rushing, I bake them off, and then my poor mom has to stay in the kitchen with all the delicious smells. But I did have extra, so she got one with her coffee this morning. So what we're gonna do is actually, grab this back here. This has already been washed, but I'm gonna go ahead and just zest this lemon, and we're gonna use the whole thing. So once I finish zesting this, we're gonna juice it and then add that to our wet ingredients, which I'll go over next. So what do you guys think so far of this recipe? A little different, lots of flavor. You know me, we don't, we keep things interesting. And the potato is kind of the interesting ingredient in this one. But again, there's a lot of really healthy ingredients in here, like that flax meal. We're going to be adding in some extra things in our wet ingredients in a minute here that also have some good beneficial nutritional properties. But here we go. Okay, this is my favorite tool. One of my favorite tools is this micro plane zester, just to get, you know, all of that nice flavor out of our lemon. And then I'm just going to cut this in half, and we're going to juice this into this little bowl so I can add this to our wet ingredients that we're going to go over next. And so this is a recipe also that you could do once you bake these off. They tend to last quite a while. I made some originally just to kind of retest the recipe. I had them in the fridge for about 2 weeks, and they were delicious, just warmed up with a little bit of tea in the afternoon. Then I started to crumble them into my yogurt. Like they were so good. They look like they'll be kind of heavy and dense, but when you bite into them, they're super light, and they just have all this great flavor. And the lemon really comes out because of the zest and the juice that we're adding. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to our wet ingredients. So because we had a little bit of power issues, I had to kind of revamp some of the steps here. But so the fat that we're using today in this biscuit or this corn cake is butter. So it's unsalted butter that's been melted. And so if you want to pop that in your microwave, just let it cool as well once it's melted. I kind of tend to do it like 10, 15 seconds at a time so you don't have a whole butter explosion in your microwave, right? But today, I just creamed it a little bit in our bowl here. And I want to show you another cool tool, which I don't know if anybody has seen one of these before. I had one for many years, and it broke eventually. I had it for a long time. It broke right here. And then I was in, I think, Bernie at a cooking store, like a kitchen store, and I found another one exactly like my old one. So I'm super excited. This is called a Danish dough whisk. And when I was many years ago learning about baking, I saw somebody on a cooking show on TV using one of these, and I was like, what is that? What I like about it is when you're making like quick breads or anything, just kind of stirring things up, it helps to aerate everything. And you know, sometimes when you're mixing things, they say don't over mix it. And especially for this recipe, I would say that as well, because we don't want to develop too much gluten, because otherwise that nice light, airy texture of that corn cake will become a little too dense and too hard. So you don't have to use a tool like this, but I'm so excited that I found one because I had one for many years, and it really kind of, I think it makes a difference when you're mixing up batters and things. Okay, but I digress. I get excited when I find cool tools. Okay, so the other ingredients we're going to add to this is our potato, of course. That's already been cooked. And for those of us just joining us, yes, we're using potato today. It's already been pre-cooked. It has the skin on it, so we've got some extra fiber in there. You can't really taste it, but you will see the flecks of the skin, which I think also makes this kind of a cool, like rustic dessert. You know, you think about summer and look at the tablecloth. Like, you know, it's fun, it's casual, it's like eat with your hands kind of food. So that's what we want to kind of inspire here. The other thing that we're going to add is just some plain Greek yogurt. So That's what I have here. Now you could, I just noticed, H-E-B does carry this brand of yogurt in a honey flavor. And so if you wanted to change it up and add the honey, that would be great too. That would make them a little bit sweeter, which I think would still be delicious. Or just stick with the plain. Okay. And I'm going to do this now that I can get in here with my whisk. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of blend all this together first because I've got my butter that isn't completely melted. I'll make it easy for myself here. But see how that comes together? This tool is really awesome. Just kind of whips through here with ease. Okay. So the next thing we're going to add are our 2 eggs. And usually I try to do them in a container just in case there's anything funky in the egg, right? We're good today. Eggs, still prices are crazy. So we're only doing 2. Okay, we're going to beat those in here. It's coming together. And this is a nice, just kind of fluffy consistency. A couple more things we're going to add is our lemon juice that we squeezed from that fresh lemon. You know, when you could use the bottled stuff if you happen to have that in your fridge. I just feel like anything fresh, it makes it taste so much, it just makes that flavor pop so much more. So I'm going to mix that in. And then the last thing we're going to add is the honey for our honey corn cake. So now if you all are watching kind of your sugar consumption, I would say you could try it with just the honey and omit the sugar that you added to the dry ingredients. They would be a little less sweet, but you know, sometimes people have to moderate their sugar, which is understandable. Or you could omit the honey and just use the regular sugar, but where's the fun in that? We need the honey, right? And honey does also have some good health properties. I don't know, I think I've shared this with you all before, and maybe somebody in here actually told me that if you eat local honey, that helps with with allergies and becoming a little more acclimated to where you live, right? Because the bees are getting all the stuff for the honey from local flowers and plants and whatnot. So that makes sense to me. Okay, so we've got this nice wet part of our batter here, and we're just gonna, kind of like every other recipe that you've seen when you've made a cake or anything, you just want to blend the two together. So before I do that though, I want to mix in all my dry ingredients here, just so that everything is well incorporated. And so that's just going to look like this. And what I do is I tend to do about half of the wet batter at a time, just again so that we're not overworking this batter as we're mixing. But because there's the cornmeal in there, you'll notice it's going to take a little while for that wet part of the batter to absorb. And so if you notice in the recipe, I say once you combine everything, just let it rest for about 10-15 minutes. And that will help with things absorbing, but not, you don't have to over mix everything. You want to avoid over mixing. So I'm going to just use this cool tool to try my best to mix it all. And then I might just go through with my spatula and just make sure that everything from the bottom has also been mixed. But already I can smell all the great flavors in here. That honey and the lemon really is very pungent. I love fresh lemon in anything. There was a recipe that I used to make as well after I went to a bakery and had them, but it was a lemon currant scone. And so this kind of reminded me of that too, like those flavors of, they used a lot of fresh lemon in the zest. It was so good. Whoop. So this is nice. The only thing I don't like about this is kind of, you can't put it in the dishwasher because of the handle, but just give it a good rinse and it will last you for a while. So what I would do here now is just let this rest for about 15 minutes. Just cover it. You don't have to put it back in the fridge or anything like that. Just let it rest on the counter. And when you are ready to scoop these out, what I recommend is just go ahead and preheat your oven to about 350. And a couple of baking tips. I don't think she's here today, but there was usually a gal who would talk about things to help with baking. And it's really important. Some people love to bake, and some people are like, it's too much of a science. I don't know what I'm doing. Things always turn out funny. But one of the things that I like when I bake these, because of the sugar that's in there, they will tend to brown first quite a bit on the bottom. So I usually get a baking sheet. Now, if you have a darker baking sheet, that's going to absorb more of the heat. So if you have one that is like that, one thing you can do is lift that bottom rack in your oven up one more level. And so that's what I've done when I bake these off. And I'll bake them at 350 for about 15 minutes on that first rack. And then halfway through, I will move them to the top rack that's not as close to that bottom element where all the heat is, and then bake them off for like another 10 minutes. And I rotate the pan as well, so you get even baking. The other trick that I use, if you all have something that looks like this, or just a regular ice cream scooper, I use this. It's probably maybe like 1/3 of a cup, because I tend to use this and go a little heavy just to make them a little bit bigger. But you get these nice uniform cakes, and that I've done that for years with like muffins, cupcakes, all of that. If you want kind of things to look a little more uniform, the scoop is your friend. And then what else for baking tips? I think, let's see. Oh, the other thing, and I remember this from when I was growing up, don't ever keep peeking. You know, most ovens have like the glass door and the light so you can see in. Don't be tempted to keep opening the oven, because you're going to be dropping the temperature, and that's going to affect your final product. So if you end up with like the cake that's sunken in, or like the muffins or whatever that are kind of flat, you're like, what happened? Well, stop peeking, because it all makes a difference. But these are kind of easy, foolproof, but I would recommend definitely, yeah. Some ovens tend to run hot. I have a gas stove now that I'm so excited about, but it does tend to run a little hot. So I have to kind of make sure that when I'm baking things in the oven, I keep an eye on it, or just drop the temperature a little bit to accommodate for that. Okay, so Jose is passing out our samples. And so super easy. Any questions on any of this? So, yeah.
Yeah, did you use the full fat Greek yogurt?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was, and actually I think I have the container here, and I'll have Jose show us the yogurt in just a second. But yeah, it's just the full fat Greek yogurt. There's a lot of great brands out there. Just the regular store brand is delicious. One of my favorites is I think it's pronounced Faye. That one also now comes in like a lactose friendly version. And they're all kind of around the same price, to be honest now, because everything's expensive. But that Faye has that extra, I don't know, I feel like it's even more creamier. But anyhow, so super easy. One of those things, maybe this is something you could whip up and then bake off on a Sunday morning for breakfast for the family. It definitely leaves your kitchen smelling really wonderful. But yeah, it's a great recipe. So hopefully I think you all have your samples now. Okay, so the final thing that I do, once that they come out of the oven, I do like to enjoy them warm. I'm not sure if they're still warm. I did bake them off this morning and try to keep them warm. But what I like to do as well is serve them kind of how Jose has served them for you, with a little dollop of extra yogurt. And then the berries are essential too. So they're colorful, they're pretty, but there are some health benefits to those, which we'll go into in just a sec here. But there is strawberry in there, and then there's a little bit of blueberry, and then you could even drizzle it with a little more honey too, if you'd like. And so actually, let me take these off, and I will show our friends at home what this looks like. So we have this delicious little corn cake, our dollop of yogurt, some berries on the side, and you could, if you wanted to, add a little extra honey. And so these are a wonderful little treat. They do keep well if you keep them in like a airtight container or a Ziploc bag in the refrigerator, and then just pop them in the microwave, or even pop them back in a little toaster oven to warm them up if you want them like that. Okay, so It's all very quiet in here. I'm assuming that's a thumbs up on this recipe. For folks at home, you'll have to try the recipe and let me know. Okay, so like I mentioned, this whole series is going to be focused on brain health, mental health, and mood. And there are some interesting things that we'll cover in the next couple of weeks as well that are nutrition based, but kind of with a little bit of a shift in just looking outside of food ingredients for nutrition. We're going to be looking at some other cool concepts as well. So, but for today, what I wanted to start us out with was just kind of like some foundational foods for brain health, right? You've probably heard of many of these. Hopefully, you all are incorporating some of these into your diet already. But one of the main categories is fruits and vegetables. Super easy, right? So, one of the things I like to tell folks is when you're at the grocery store next time, here are some of the main like antioxidant rich. Antioxidants are super essential for brain health. But some of those examples can be things like blueberries, strawberries, like we have today in our recipe, blackberries, raspberries, and then citrus fruits. So anything orange, grapefruit, lemons. We have lemons today. And then when consumed regularly, these fruits help increase blood flow and oxygen to the brain. So we want to keep that brain pumping healthy, keep it in tip-top shape, and these fruits are great for that. When it comes to vegetables, the key is go green. So the darker the green, the better. So things like spinach, kale, and collard greens provide a dose of brain-boosting nutrition, and they're great sources of vitamin K, folate, and lutein, which all have been shown to support brain function and then slow down age-related cognitive decline. So things like, memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's, things like that. When it comes to, a couple things I wanted to mention. The potato, when it comes to vegetables. So potato has B6 and the fiber, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about the fiber and healthy gut and healthy brain connection. And something called choline. And so that was one I had to look up because it's been a little while since I've talked about this one. But choline is helpful in the structure of cells and keeping just sort of those neurons in the brain healthy. And so when that happens, we increase like our memory, anything with cognitive learning, thinking, all of that. So potatoes are actually great for that too. So the secret ingredient, the star of our recipe, is also great for brain health. And then we talked about the blueberries already. Okay. When it comes to animal proteins, fat is where it's at, which oftentimes people stay away from fat. They have heard the message constantly about fat in food is something to fear, not fat in food is essential when it comes to specific types of fats. So fat found in fish like salmon, sardines, tuna, even mackerel has beneficial nutrients to the structure and function of brain cells and can help improve learning, memory, and mood. So all of the omega-3s that are found in those types of fatty fish are really key, but they can also be found in plant-based proteins. But before I move on to that, anyone here fans of sort of these different types of fish? Like salmon, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? No pun intended. Salmon, pretty easy to find here. Wild salmon, I would say if you could find it, is best. But I know we're kind of inland here, so not always available. But tuna also is great. But anybody a fan of like sardines and mackerel? Have you tried them? Yeah. There's sometimes people are like, oh, they're too stinky. I don't know what to do with them. But they are loaded with really good health benefits, and they are delicious. And so I encourage you all. I always want to bring in a recipe just to kind of convert people who say, I will never eat that because they're so delicious, but I don't want to stink up the classroom. So, but I would encourage you all, if you haven't tried them, to sometimes you can even try them already canned, but if you can get fresh mackerel, you can prepare it like any other kind of fish. Throw it in the oven whole, roast it with some herbs and some lemon. Like it's super delicious. Go to a reputable grocer, have the person behind the counter help you pick one out so you make sure it's fresh. I think a lot of times people, especially when they're cooking things like fish, they're a bit intimidated because one, they don't know what to look for, and it's true, if you're in an area or a region that doesn't tend to have a lot of those foods, make sure you get something that's good quality. And if you need to ask behind the counter, that's what those folks are there for. When it comes to plant-based proteins, think about beans, nuts, and seeds, because they also contain omega-3s, and they also contain something else that's really helpful to us, iron. So iron-rich nutrients are essential to carry oxygen to the brain. And so you want to think about incorporating things like edamame. Anybody a fan of those delicious little green? Yes, they're awesome. Pinto kidney beans and black beans are also great. I have learned through many years of teaching in the schools and kiddos, black beans they're not very popular. I love them, but sometimes people don't know because they're used to pinto beans here, right, in our area. Lots of delicious pinto beans. But black beans are also a great source of iron. And then things like pumpkin and flax seeds are great to incorporate into your meals. So again, we use this golden flax meal. You could even just put the flax seeds into things that you're baking. Actually, that would have been great to sprinkle some on top of these corn cakes as they were, before they bake, just for some extra garnish. That would be great. And then a couple other categories we're going to look at here. So let's see here. Yes, fiber and probiotics. So why are those good for us, and how does that connect to the brain? Well, let me tell you. And I think we did some of this, maybe in some of my early classes, we did a class on brain health and some of these foods. So it might not be too unfamiliar for you all if you've been coming to my classes. But there is something called the gut-brain connection. And it's not just a conversation trend. It's actually proven science that is demonstrating that how we tend and care for our gut microbiome can improve the health of our bodies, our brains, and our overall mental health. So that is huge right now in the field of nutrition. And I'm so happy to see that because, I've been working for many years in the food as medicine space. And I always used to say I was working in that before it got cool to use that phrase. But I'm happy to hear that that is a thing now because we can't always rely on the science and the medicine. We have to also take control of what we consume, what we're purchasing, how we're preparing the foods, and just be a little more educated and empowered to choose foods that have some more of these nutrients that are healthy for our bodies. And fiber and probiotics are two good examples of that. So fiber-rich foods can include things like fruits and vegetables, which we've already talked about, hearty whole grains such as brown rice, quinoa, bulgur, whole wheat oats, any kind of whole wheat pastas and breads. And then the other category of gut-friendly foods include probiotics. And so today, what was our example of a probiotic? The yogurt, right? And so it has that good bacteria that our gut needs to stay healthy. Like we've got to feed the bacteria that's in our gut already, and yogurt is a good thing for that. A couple other examples of good probiotics, sauerkraut and kombucha. Who here is a fan of sauerkraut? I grew up in the Midwest in Milwaukee, and so lots of German, Polish influences, lots of brats and sauerkraut. And I never thought that I would like it, but when I tried it, I am a big fan, and now even more so because of the probiotic nutrition that I know is in there. I would encourage you all. I actually wanted to put sauerkraut in a recipe and I kind of was like, don't push it, Raquel. But it is quite delicious on its own. And once you get past the smell, it's kind of like the sardines and the mackerel. Once you get past the smell, if you think about, like, if you enjoy red pickled onions, right, on tacos or whatever, it's kind of the same thing. It's got that crunch. It's a little sweet. You can add it into all sorts of things. You could make a really delicious salad and throw that in there. If you just buy it at the store in the can, it's delicious. If you can find it in the jar where it's got, some of the nice kind of pickled properties, it's so good. So maybe try. I always kind of like how when I used to teach kids, try a little bite. Let me know what you think. At least give it a try. But it does have some great nutritional benefits. And then kombucha, there are so many. I remember when it first was around, I was living on the West Coast and I was like, what is this crazy stuff with this crazy name? It's delicious. It's kind of this also fermented drink that has a yeast. It's made with usually a caffeinated type of tea, although sometimes you can find an herbal tea, kombucha, every once in a while. But it has all these great flavors, and it has the gut friendly health properties as well. Here at the regular grocery store, you can see the whole shelves of so many different brands. Give them a try if you haven't before. Just know they're not going to be super sweet and sugary. They're going to have a natural sweetness to them, but some of them just have some really delicious flavors. So give them a try if you're curious about that, because they're good for your gut. And then last but not least, beverages and other delights. So when it comes to beverages, obviously caffeine is also good for brain health. And typically, what's the go-to source for caffeine in this country? Coffee, right? However, coffee also has kind of its downside if overconsumed, right? Like it can cause sort of that crash or that jitteriness, and sometimes people have real sensitivities in their stomach when they drink too much coffee, like the reflux and all of that. So one thing that you could try if you haven't already is green tea, because it also has those great antioxidant properties, but it can help with mental alertness and clarity. So it's a nice one to try. The other thing, which is my personal favorite, is dark chocolate. It contains, and you have to find the kind that is like 70% dark chocolate, which, if you're a fan of chocolate and you tend to like the milk and it's a little bit sweeter, you have to develop your palate for the dark chocolate. But there are some really wonderful ones out there. And I think I was telling you all, there's a really cool gourmet food store in Burnie called Epicurean Gourmet, I believe. It has a whole wall of different types of chocolates from all over the world, and just simple chocolate bars. Like, do a chocolate tasting, get 3 different ones, and just try them, because they all have different like characteristics. It's kind of like wine, tasting. They have some fruity notes, some have some floral notes, and so when you think about enjoying chocolate, the lower the sugar, but the more antioxidant from the dark chocolate, the cocoa bean, is good for brain health. And naturally, it's going to reduce stress and mood, because who doesn't love chocolate, right? So that is all I have on that, I think. Let me just make sure I didn't forget anything. No, I did not. Anything else you all can think of? We have quite a nice example of everything that we use today, our ingredients. So we had the blueberries, we had the yogurt, that potato, the flax meal. Like, we had some great things in this recipe that demonstrated some of those essential ingredients for brain health. But can you all think of anything else, or are there things that you enjoy right now in your diet that would fall into some of these categories?
I like, actually you buy it, it's called Cryo Brew is the company. You can only get it either on Amazon or through the company. So it's Cryo, CRIO, Brew, BRU, and it's the cacao bean. It actually looks like coffee, ground up. But it's cacao, and I do that every day. I enjoy it. And another cocoa, like a cocoa without the amount of cadmium in it. Sometimes you'll see the packages of cacao powder, and on the back it'll say something about California. This is not acceptable in California because the level of the cadmium, I think, is that's in it. But there's a product called Cocoa Via, and I found out about it through the pharmacy people in the newspaper, the Sunday newspaper of the Express News. It's called the Pharmacy People, and they have articles written out, obviously every Sunday, and they had one on Cocoa Via, because they tested it, or some lab tested it, and found that it had the lowest amount of this cadmium. Again, Cocoa Via is purchased online, or buy directly from them. We like the Cocoa Via a lot, but the cacao bean is every morning.
Yeah.
We do it every morning.
And I'm sorry, what was the name of the first one again?
It's Cryo Brew.
Cryo.
CRIO, capital B-R-U.
Okay.
Cryo Brew.
Cryo Brew and Cocoa Via as alternatives for coffee. There was another one similar to this Cryo Brew several years ago, and I'll have to look up the name, but I used that when I completely switched off of coffee. It was quite delicious. I could use it in a French press, kind of like making coffee that way. And I mean, I enjoyed it because I was missing the coffee caffeine, but it did the trick. I can't remember the name of it or if it's even around. This was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I discovered it. My sister-in-law has a lot of food allergies, and she also introduced me to something made out of figs. It's not caffeinated, but it is kind of ground like a powder, so you could enjoy it like coffee, almost like instant coffee. And then I think there's something called Tivani that's kind of like that. It has chicory root. Like there's a lot of those kind of non-caffeinated drinks that look like caffeine but don't have that, but also have some good health properties to them. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
It's a coffee imitation called Post-it.
Oh yes, that one's been around forever. That was one of the original. You know, that's super expensive though. If you see it, if you can find it, it's like $11 a jar. Because I think they there's not a lot of places that carry it anymore, but that also has chicory root in it, and it's quite delicious. Yeah, if you can find it and you want to try it. I've seen it at a couple of HEBs, but it's this little jar. They used to have 2 different flavors, but yeah, that was one of my favorites too. But then it's called Postum. Yeah, it's aside from any caffeinated drinks, anything else you all kind of, is this sort of a recipe that you might want to try? Yeah, it's kind of different, but you know, you look at the cake and you're like, oh, that looks like it's going to be kind of dense, and then you bite into it and you're like, oh man, this is like super nice. It's light, it's kind of crumbly, but it's got the corn. If you're a fan of cornmeal or cornbread, biscuits and things like that, this is kind of a nice alternative because it has some yummy things. And the lemon, that's also my favorite in there. It's like,
feel like a scone.
Yeah, it's got kind of that lightness of a scone, but a little bit of the crustiness on the outside. So yeah, it's good. Well, thank you guys. This is kind of a short one, but thank you all for making the trek, coming out today. That we're just kicking things off. Well, I'll be back for the next 3 weeks. I think we're going to take a pause during the week of Memorial Day weekend because I know people tend to go off and do some fun things for that. But we do have 3 more classes next week. We will be talking about, let's see, for next week we have planned something called the Mind Diet and going over that. If you've not heard of it, it was kind of a new one to me too. So I'm really excited to share it with you. And then the recipe we're going to attempt to make it here. I'm still kind of working out how we're going to do that. Hopefully we have power next week because I will need it. So we're going to make tofu spring rolls. So if you all have been curious about how to make spring rolls and have never given it a try, we're going to do it next week. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. Thanks, folks at home, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.